For the Model Curriculum Project, we developed over 140 model curriculum units based on understanding by design in 4 content areas.
We started with the premise of how can we help teachers write curriculum because we know that they can. And then now we want to empower them and build their capacity to adapt to meet the goals for their student learning.
And our goal is for districts to take units, to customize them, adapt them for their students and their instructional goals, and use them as one way of implementing a standards-based curriculum.
We're going to introduce a 6-step process for customizing and piloting units. So I could write this again and it'll be 36 steps. In some districts, I don't know, maybe it's going to be 10 or 12 steps. I would say that these are the crucial moves that need to happen in order to implement one of the model curriculum units in your building or in your school or across your team. The first step is for teachers to do is to examine student data. What are the patterns and trends they see? Teachers should look at district-wide data, they should look at state data, for example, PARCC exams, whatever data they have available. They should also look at classroom data. Really get a snapshot of what the student needs are and determine that.
I mean, if you have a higher achieving group, you actually could do problem solution if you think they can handle it, because you're not expecting mastery on every single one of these things.
At that point, teachers then would examine the unit that they're hoping to pilot. And based on the student needs and the student data, they'll begin to customize before they even teach or implement the unit.
That's the tough thing about the objectives is writing them so that you don't give anything away.
So once they have reviewed the data, the next step is sort of really doing the customization of the unit and the unit plan.
I think that's a perfect example of where you can modify, depending on what they want to do in the law class.
All right, so let's just put here and say example of how to modify.
You'll review the unit, you'll look at challenges, you maybe scaffold more, maybe you'll scaffold less. You'll think about your pacing, the time available, students' background knowledge, and you will customize that unit.
I see teachers sitting together either around a table or pulling the student desks together, and everyone has a copy of the unit, and they are just going through things and asking each other questions.
So that's just within their group, or are you going to put you put the character groups together? You put the video characters and the story characters together.
That's better. It doesn't say that, but let's do that.
Okay.
So
what you really want to be focusing on is what are the essential questions and understandings? What's the SEPA? What are the standards targeted in the SEPA? What are the standards for the instruction?
So you obviously have to add vocabulary during your reading that's not...
Okay, we examined the data, we looked at the unit, now we need to actually make those changes before we begin. And teachers will do that collaboratively.
They've had practice on it yet, you would want to introduce it in this lesson. I think you would just stick to the other story elements like character setting.
And we did main events, character setting and main events.
So we'd like to have that back and forth with educators, pushing each other's thinking, not like this is how we're going to do the unit, to really be an authentic teaching experience.
So if you're continually talking about these story elements, then they'll have already mastered what they mean by the time you get to this unit.
Third step would be to pilot the unit. Okay, how are we going to implement this? Do we agree on how many days it will take? Do we agree on the expected outcomes so we can assess whether or not the unit was effective?
Before they could even make a prediction
for that one, because they're not going to see their experiment till the next day, till after it freezes.
As the educators are piloting the unit, we want to keep a record of how our students are doing.
Yeah, that's going to be their student notebooks. We decided that
We want to know if our students are working towards the goal, if they're meeting the goal. We want to know if the students are actually beginning to understand the concept.
But we need to make a question that's general, right?
I'm just saying, to make meaning for that question for our kids is to draw it in a local context.
Then you start teaching. You need to have a midpoint meeting and share strategies, but you can also really benefit from sharing strategies in real time. Maybe your school has PLCs you can meet daily. Maybe you want to use Google Docs and share feedback back and forth. Hey, step 1 was really complicated for these students. This is how I broke it down. Step 1 was a breeze. This is the discussion we had about the essential questions.
Near the end of the implementation, you'll identify certain student work that you want to look at. You can't look at all of it. So your team will establish that up front. What do we want to look at to see if our students really got this? To really see if students understood it.
I think those would be, those are the smaller assessments, so you're just assessing their knowledge, what they know, and then at the end, okay, I know you know all this, now can you apply all that?
The evidence of understanding is in the student work. Let's take a look at it. Did they reach those understandings? Were they able to gather evidence to address essential questions? Let's look at that work and let's determine that.
We like protocols and we encourage protocols because what they do is they give a structure to the conversation. Everyone has an opportunity to look at student work from other educators and have that rich conversation around what they're seeing, what they think it means, where did they hit it, where did they not.
So at some point you're going to have to make sure that this task does actually...
So that task reflects their knowledge and understanding.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do they need to know what they're talking about?
That's the idea.
So the task relates to the knowledge, which should relate directly to the understanding, which should link back to the standards.
Correct.
Share a protocol with teachers for calibrating student work. Meaning, okay, are we all grading it the same way? Yes, we're using the same rubric, but let's take a look at what we deem to be a good paper, or a 4, or 100, whatever you want to call it. But let's all look at that.
We do a lot of like class-generated lists and then going through and evaluating them, talking about the pros and cons of each, and then after that, finding evidence. We walk through the process together.
I would also say that your students should be doing that in the classroom as well on an ongoing basis. What worked for you? Did that rubric work? How did you like doing it that way? As a learner, did that help you to understand it better? You need to get your students involved in this, as most of you probably already do. That's where you might say, let's collect data, student work, and see how they respond to these questions. After you've looked at the student work, you'll revise the units and lessons one more time, using teacher feedback that you got, and also using the student work.
And I think that would be more valuable for the kids to go large and then go local. You know?
So as you've taught this unit and collected feedback from your team as you're going through the process, at the end, before you put the unit away, you need to collect that feedback, think about how you're going to improve the unit so that you've made the corrections before you take it out and teach it again.
They'll give you tons of feedback on
students
that.
With a trial of these questions.
Yes.
What did we do right? What do we think we should change? Okay, so next time we want to do this unit again, but we've noticed where our pitfalls were, where we ran up into, particular challenges. So let's do a revision. Let's go back, and let's look at the customization that we wrote and put in. And after the pilot, we see, okay, well, we stumbled here. We need to fix this. We should add a lesson here. That's the revisions that we want them to do to their own units, the units that they customize.
Have that conversation. So if they're away, when we do come back,
The last step would be to share out your version of the unit with other teachers in your district.
And you both share the unit, but one would have the reading component.
To share the usable form of the unit, so as people go back to teach it, they have a way to access it and build on what you constructed.
The process is not just about implementing model curriculum units. I know as a former director in districts and a teacher, I want this work to multiply. You want teachers to be comfortable. Yes, we want them to implement maybe another unit that was developed in the curriculum work, but we also want teachers to be able to do this for themselves.
I love the collaboration piece for them.
It is all about bringing people together and working through things as a team, from colleague to colleague, respecting what everyone brings to the table, and then being able to see it all the way through a process. From the beginning, you're creating this unit, this thing that has not existed before, but you have the power to create it.
This is a process. This is about collaboration. This is about sitting with colleagues and saying, how can we get kids really excited about this material and able to take this material to the next step?
Especially with your 11, 12 class, that's going to take a lot of thought.
I hope people find they can work with the team and we can customize, adapt, and implement a unit so our students will get a new standards-based, engaging educational experience.